This is part 7 of A Wolf Amongst Lions by Kallypso. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's continue. Chapter 39, Paranoia. It was difficult to fight a war when one did not know who to trust, and Tywin's report about the Boltons had left Robb suspicious of all his banner men. His decision to make peace had not been popular, and before he made peace, he had alienated the Karstarks after he killed their patriarch. How many of his bannermen were on the side of the Boltons, and were the Boltons in league with the Freys or a separate threat altogether? These questions poisoned his mind and left him with many sleepless nights. He wished often for Talisa. In the last war she had always been at his side. Their love was fresh and new, naive perhaps, but she was something to hope for after a hard day. Now his tent greeted him with silence and a slew of problems to keep him occupied until daybreak. Oddly, the Lannister army became something of a blessing. Tywin's first act on the battlefield was to burn the Mallister fleet at Seaguard, making a coastal assault impossible. It allowed the Tully forces to lay siege to the western castle of the twins without worrying about an attack from the rear. Tywin sent out smaller forces to attack other Frey allies. Some of them surrendered as soon as they saw the Lannister lion, not wanting to provoke Tywin's wrath. The small folk stopped fighting soldiers for the same reason. It confused Robb. Had the Freys not told their allies that they planned to antagonize Lord Tywin as well? Was this a scheme of Walder Frey alone? It seemed foolish to pull the lion's tail and not expect a response. Even as the Lannisters cleared out the threats from behind them, Lord Tywin's presence only made the northern lords more combative. The Umbers were especially vocal about wanting him gone. They claimed that the North could fight its own battles. The Umbers had been the most vocally against the peace as well. Could they be with the Boltons? The Bolton men were quiet about the whole thing. They did not raise dissent and they followed orders without question. Robb didn't like it. It only made him feel more nervous. He suspected everyone of a possible plot. If the Boltons could turn on him, couldn't anyone else? They did not respect him as their leader, not since he surrendered to the crown. Lord Stark. They would never respect him like they respected his father. His father won a great rebellion to overthrow the Targaryen dynasty. But Robb. Lord Stark. Robb snapped out of his thoughts and looked up. He had nearly forgotten where he was for a moment. In Tywin Lannister's tent, listening to a report about the surrender of House Darry. It was a victory for their army, one less enemy to worry about, yet Robb had barely registered the words. Yes, House Darry, he murmured at last. That's nearly all of the Frey allies surrendered now. All but the Mallisters, yes, but they are not a concern without their fleet, Tywin said. The Lord of Casterly Rock was studying him closely. Robb tried to ignore it, staring intently down at the map on the table. That didn't take very long, he murmured. The Riverlands is still scarred from the last war, Tywin said. I'm not sure they understood what kind of game Walder Frey was playing. I did not expect them to last long. This is only happening at all because you set the Riverlands on fire, Robb muttered. Really, and I could have sworn it had something to do with you breaking your vow to Walder Frey, Tywin said flatly. Don't presume to lay all of the blame for your troubles on me. You made missteps without my help. Robb felt rather like knocking over a chair, but that would have been an immature response. Instead, he gripped the back and imagined he could crush the wood with his anger. Lord Tywin was silent for a long moment, then he indicated the chair. Sit. I don't take orders from you, Robb said. I'm the hand of your king. Technically you do take orders from me, Tywin said. Sit, you've been swaying ever since you stepped into my tent. Robb couldn't argue with that. He felt utterly exhausted, but part of him wanted to keep standing anyway, just to defy the Lord of Casterly Rock. Ultimately, he rejected that childish inclination and took a seat. Good, Tywin crossed over to his desk and poured 2 goblets of wine. You haven't been sleeping. It was a statement, not a question. How can I? Robb asked. I don't know which of my men to trust. The traitors will come to the surface soon enough, Tywin said. Keep your tent well guarded and you do not have to fear a knife in your back while you rest. And what if the guards cannot be trusted either? Robb muttered. There's a fine line between suspicion and paranoia, Lord Stark. Tywin moved over to him, offering him one of the goblets of wine. Robb accepted slowly. Maybe the wine would settle his nerves, and he desperately needed that. Aerys Targaryen let the latter drive him to madness by the end. That bodes well for me, Robb said. It doesn't matter. Even the men loyal to me see me as weak, because you forced my surrender. I did, Tywin agreed. You could have refused. You would have killed Arya. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice, Tywin said. Men always have choices, even when they're terrible. Those choices have consequences either way. Tywin sipped his wine. You made the better of the two choices. Better for you, perhaps. No, better for you as well. And your family and your bannermen, they just don't know it. They'll never truly know it. Robb's grip tightened on his cup. Most of them still see me as a boy. They respect my father's ghost more than me, not that I blame them. When my grandfather and uncle were killed and my Aunt Lyanna taken, my father went to war to seek justice. And he got it. He helped end centuries of Targaryen rule. Rhaegar died. Aerys died. He did exactly what he set out to do. Perhaps, Tywin said, but your father's killer is dead as well. Not killed by a Stark, so it doesn't matter much, does it? Tywin paused for a long moment before he spoke again. Your father did not kill Rhaegar or Aerys himself. Did it matter to your banner men then? Robb did not reply. No, his father hadn't killed any Targaryens personally. He assisted Robert Baratheon all the way to the throne, yet still he was strong. He was respected as a military commander. Robb felt as if he was only playing at being his father. Respect is not earned by your name alone. Even eldest sons are not born into respect, Tywin said as he sat down at the table across from Robb. My father was not the eldest son. He was third in line for Lord of Casterly Rock. He stumbled into the title and he was not equipped to deal with it. By the time I was born, the Lannister name had lost all respect in the West. Other lords knew they could manipulate my father into giving them whatever they wanted. They refused to pay taxes. My father refused to force the issue. The responsibility fell to me. Now. Only fools disrespect the Lannister name. Do you know why? I assume you are going to tell me, Robb murmured. Because I was willing to do whatever was necessary to ensure my family lived on, Tywin said. You were willing to massacre innocents, Robb retorted. I know the story. You killed every Rain and Tarbeck down to the last child. And since then my bannermen have never rebelled against me, Tywin said. Robb glared down at his wine. My father's bannermen did not rebel against him. He never took part in a massacre. Your father had the luxury of winning a noble rebellion, Tywin said. Not every lord gets to choose to play hero for the respect of their people. I thought all men had choices, even terrible ones, Robb retorted. Tywin regarded him coldly. They do, and I made mine a long time ago. He stood again, returning to his desk. How you deal with this rebellion will determine the future of your house, Lord Stark. I will handle the phrase once they surrender because I don't trust your fool of an uncle to have a strong hand. But I leave the fate of any northern traitors to you. You will have a choice. If you make the wrong choice, you will have another rebellion on your hands in a few years' time. Make the right choice, and the North might know stability again. Stability, that was a foreign concept to Robb, but he knew he must seek it to keep his family safe. Justice was not the problem. He was willing to put all of the traitors to the sword. But how would he decide who was a traitor and who was not? Where did he show mercy? His father always spoke against punishing the innocent for the sins of the guilty. But where did one draw that line? You are a better commander than your father. Tywin broke the silence again as he began to sort through papers on his desk. Robb's head jerked up. Aye, what? Your father was not born to rule the North, Tywin said. Your uncle Brandon was. Eddard Stark was a second son trained all his life to follow. You were raised knowing that you would lead one day, Tywin said. But beyond that your father was too honourable, too honest. On the battlefield he always made a straightforward play. It worked against the Mad King because the rebellion had great numbers and Aerys had few allies in the end. But if your father had been leading the charge in the War of 5 Kings, I would have routed him in a few months. Robb opened his mouth to defend his father, but Tywin Lannister held up a hand. Fortunately for you, you did not fight like your father. You made moves that he might have called dishonourable. That gave you a great many victories on the battlefield, because you didn't treat war like a game of honour. You treated it like a life or death conflict, which it was. If I lost, my family was doomed, Robb said, so I couldn't lose. Family outweighs everything else, including honour. Tywin sat back in his seat. Your sister understands that. I hope you do as well. I do, but I do not discard honour, Lord Tywin. Robb stood slowly. My father may have been too honest for King's Landing at any rate, but in the north honour is important. My men will not respect me if I follow in your footsteps. I don't suggest you follow in my footsteps. Different situations require different responses, Tywin said. I did not deal with each of the 5 kings in the same way, did I? That was true, he hadn't. Tywin had a different way of dealing with each of the houses who rose up against the crown. The Stark family had survived, but the other Baratheons and the Greyjoys, they were gone. You said you'll leave any northern traitors to me, Robb said after a pause. Do you mean that? I do, Tywin said. Why? Robb asked. You're so fond of giving orders, controlling everything yourself, and the north is a very large stretch of land. Why leave its fate in my hands? Because, Tywin said, I want to see what kind of leader you will become. Sieges were a long and tedious business that usually involved a lot of waiting, and waiting was far more difficult when one was worried about the fate of their children. Every day that passed, Catelyn was worried that Walder Frey would send more fingers from Bran or Arya. Worse, she feared that they might already be dead. She had not seen them since she arrived. What if he disposed of them months ago? It would not be wise to kill hostages, but then neither was antagonizing 2 major houses at once. Then one day they did receive a letter from Walder Frey, carried by a single rider. I will meet with Robb Stark to discuss terms of peace within a fortnight, or I will kill Bran Stark. It was short and to the point, and absolutely out of the question. If you go to discuss peace terms with Walder Frey, you won't leave the castle alive, Tywin Lannister told Robb after he read the note. They had gathered once again in his tent, Tywin and Jaime to represent the Lannisters, Robb and Catelyn to represent the north, and Edmure to represent the Riverlands. But if he comes with the intention to discuss peace, Edmure started to say. It won't matter, Tywin said. Walder Frey is willing to break the rules of war, honour and the gods, and the moment he kills Robb, the entirety of the northern army will destabilise, giving any possible traitors the perfect opportunity to seize power. Meeting with him would be walking into a trap. I agree, Robb said. So how do you suggest I save Bran and Arya? Tywin glanced up at him. This seems like a question for your bannermen. Why ask me? He asked the question like he already knew the answer, as if he was testing Robb. I do not know which of my bannermen can be trusted, Robb said. If I make plans with any traitors, they could warn Walder Frey and prompt him to kill Bran sooner, and if I try to make plans with only my most trustworthy men, the traitors will know I suspect them. Tywin inclined his head. If the question was a test, Robb had clearly passed. Yes, they would. Hopefully we can prevent that. Tywin rested back in his seat. Walder Frey's place in this war rests entirely on his hostages. Without them he has no leverage and we could storm his keep within the night. Easier said than done, Robb said. But not impossible, Tywin said. What do you know of the defiance of Duskendale? Robb's brow furrowed. It was a massacre, wasn't it? A massacre of House Darklyn and all of their allies, yes, Catelyn said. She had heard the horror stories of Duskendale when she was a girl. They were not the sort of stories a young lady was supposed to hear, but Petta had always enjoyed telling the awful tales. The Mad King ordered every one of them executed. Some of those executions were particularly brutal. That was the aftermath, yes, Tywin said, but the massacre came as the result of a particularly stupid rebellion. The Darklyn took the king prisoner when he came to collect their taxes. Storming the keep may have killed him, so Barristan Selmy volunteered to undertake a rescue mission. It succeeded. Lord Darklyn surrendered the next day. As I recall, Father, Jaime spoke up, that was a very risky gamble that you did not think would succeed. War is full of risky gambling, Tywin said. I wouldn't send just one man in this case. No, a small group would better, Jaime said. Actually, I may have something to contribute to this possible strategy. Tywin glanced up at Jaime. Really? Don't act so surprised, Jaime said. I may be terrible at politics, but I'm actually rather good at war, and the strategy I used at Dragonstone might work here. Didn't you lose your hand at Dragonstone? Robb asked. Jaime let out an irritated breath. Yes, but that had nothing to do with my strategy. The strategy worked. He stepped forward to the table. We concentrated our attacks at obvious points on the outer wall. The soldiers went to deal with those attacks and left gaps. That allowed a small group of men to sneak into the keep at one of those gaps. They disguised themselves as Baratheon men. Then they caused a distraction to draw the guards away from the main gate and opened it for my army. It was a gamble, yes, but one that won us the day. We could sneak a few men over the walls to rescue Bran Stark with the same method, and the twins aren't surrounded on all sides by ocean. That makes it easier. It does, Tywin said, though if possible we should place men inside the keep well in advance. Unlike Duskendale and Dragonstone, this can't be a last-minute gamble. This needs to be carefully planned, and we'll need eyes and ears inside to do it. The men who helped infiltrate Dragonstone are still with us. I can set them to it, Jaime said. They proved themselves more than capable a few years ago. But there are other problems, Robb said. If we antagonize Walder Frey with a direct attack, he may kill Bran or Arya sooner. When you attacked Dragonstone, Stannis did not have any hostages. So perhaps the distraction should not be an attack, Catelyn murmured. What then? Jaime asked. Walder Frey wants to meet to discuss peace terms, Catelyn said. Despite Robb's broken vow, he will expect Starks to keep to a code of honor. If we accept, he may lower his guard. But who do we send to meet with Walder Frey? Robb asked. The same person we sent the first time, Catelyn said. Me. Robb shook his head. No, absolutely not. Robb's right, you can't go, Edmure said. He'll kill you too, Tywin pointed out, or at the very least add you to his collection of hostages. Of course he will, Catelyn said, which is why he will allow me to enter the keep. If Robb sends one of his bannermen, it will be seen as an insult and provoke him. Lord Walder will see Robb sending his mother as an insult as well, but he'll still accept it because he can use me against Robb. Then while he thinks he has earned another victory, we pull the rug out from under him. Tywin rubbed his jaw. It could work, but there is still a high likelihood you will die. Once Walder Frey understands that there is foul play, he might kill you immediately. Exactly, Robb said, so it's out of the question. It's not. Catelyn lifted her chin, looking between her son and Tywin. If it can save Arya and Bran, let Lord Walder kill me. I am more than willing to die. There was a long silence in the tent after her declaration, until Jaime hesitantly spoke again. Lord Stark, it isn't ideal, but I can't think of a better alternative. Can you? Robb stared a long time at the ground, as if searching there for another way. For any other way. Catelyn's heart clenched at the sight. Her son was everything a good lord should be, and yet sometimes she still saw the child in him. Her boy, forced to grow up too early. He did not want to sacrifice his mother, but he knew as well as anyone there wasn't another way. This was their best chance. At last Robb looked up and met her gaze. All right, but I will only send you in if there is a chance of success. First, in order for this plan to work, we must get men on the inside. We must have a guaranteed opening. If we have that, then I'll send you. He swallowed hard. But only if you're promised to survive as long as possible. I will, Catelyn said. Robb turned back to Tywin. I'll send word to Lord Walder, agreeing to meet to discuss terms in a fortnight. I will tell my bannermen that I plan to send my mother to negotiate, and that we will cease our attacks during that time. If there is a traitor amongst them, word of my orders will find its way to Walder Frey. It will make him less likely to suspect. Then I will choose men that I trust above all others to tell the true plan. And if you choose wrong, Tywin asked. There's a fine line between suspicion and paranoia, Lord Tywin, Robb said flatly. If I don't have any men I can trust, then I am clearly not fit to lead the North. Tywin nodded once, as if satisfied with his response. I suppose you plan to lead the ultimate rescue. I do, Robb said. I won't truly trust anyone to do this but myself. It's not wise to put yourself in the crossfire. The North could easily lose its leader if things go poorly, Tywin said. I know, Robb said. As I said, we'll only go through with this if there's a reasonable chance of success. If your spies find no openings, then we will hold back. But if they do, then I will make sure that things do not go poorly. See that you do, Tywin said. With that, Tywin Lannister seemed to give his final approval for this venture. It was strange to Catelyn that they were plotting with this man at all, but an enemy of their enemy was their ally. And Arya and Bran came before any past grudges. Chapter 40, Plans and Plots. Jaime caught up to Robb once they left his father's tent. Lord Stark, might I have a word? You may have several if you'd like, Robb said. For a moment Lady Catelyn stopped to look back at her son, and he waved her to continue on. What is it? You said you plan to lead the rescue mission yourself, yes? Jaime asked. Yes, Robb said. Men in the North respect action. They won't respect me if I send others in to do the work for me. Jaime nearly sighed. This boy really was his father's son. It occurred to Jaime, not for the first time, that he was holding a sword that by all rights should belong to Robb Stark, but now was not the time to discuss that. I'm not arguing, Jaime said, but I would like to join you. Robb studied Jaime for a long moment. Are you so eager to lose your other hand? No, I don't plan on it, Jaime said. I'm hoping the golden hand might distract them. Most men are used to targeting the right side. Even so, I doubt your father would approve. Of course he wouldn't. Why do you think I waited until we left his tent to mention it? Robb's eyes narrowed as he studied Jaime. Why then, why risk this at all? You're risking as much as I am, Jaime pointed out. They're my family, my responsibility. What's your reason? Jaime exhaled and flexed his left hand a few times. He really hated having this discussion. Did he really need to spell it out? I told you already, didn't I? I built my entire identity on my right hand. After I lost it, I thought I might as well die, because there was no point in it all if I couldn't wield a sword. Your sister is the one who made me pick up a blade with my left hand. You told me, Robb murmured. You didn't tell me why, though. Why did she do it? Oh, I don't know. She has this odd habit of saving members of my family. I don't think she even realizes she's doing it, Jaime sighed. Though really, perhaps she just wanted a sparring partner and I was there. Or maybe she's a genuinely good person. I'm not really sure. He was sure Arya Stark was a good person, better than most. Even if she had a strange way of going about her father's honor, she still had it. He hated to think of her trapped in the twins without her weapons. Fortunately, he had brought all of them south. Her nameless knife, needle, and Winter's Fury, just in case she needed them. Maybe he could pass one to her when they found her. Look, we can call it paying a debt and be done with it, Jaime said. I'd like to help save Arya. Is that so much for you to believe? Robb shook his head. It's not. Fine. Have it your way so long as you don't stab me in the back. Jaime's smile was sharp. Don't worry, I only do that to vicious kings. When Robb had left, Jaime returned to his father's tent. He was turning a Syvas piece in his hand, but he set it down when Jaime entered. What did you discuss with Robb Stark? Tywin asked. We are plotting to overthrow you so I can claim the title of Lord of Casterly Rock sooner, Jaime said snidely. Tywin gave him a look. I'm not in the mood for jokes right now. You're never in the mood for jokes, Jaime sighed. I just thought it would be important to get Arya a weapon as soon as possible. One of the soldiers on the expedition can carry needle easily enough, or her knife. Tywin nodded once. I suppose it's fortunate that she didn't have her swords with her, otherwise they would be in the possession of the Freys. He sipped from his wine, but perhaps if she had her swords with her, she wouldn't have been taken. I couldn't say, Jaime said. I believe she kept them in her room to avoid drawing suspicion from the Northern Lords. That doesn't seem like her idea. No, if I had to guess it was her mother and brother, Jaime said. It doesn't matter, she'll be back soon, she'll be all right. He was half saying it because he needed to reassure himself. He was worried about her. Even though she was a fighter, he was still worried, because he had seen strong people die so many times in his life. His father did not reply. Jaime wondered if he was just as uncertain. After all, Walder Frey had not made any mention of Arya in his note. Had she fought back and earned a dagger to the heart, Bran was a more valuable hostage since he was a son. It's late, his father said at last. You should see to those men from the Dragonstone siege. We don't have time to delay. Right, Jaime murmured. Of course. For a week Robb kept silent about Walder Frey's request. He did not tell any of his men, not yet. Before they could really go through with their plan, they had to be sure that it had a chance of succeeding. The first step was getting men inside the twins. They had been probing at their defences for some time, so they had an idea of small chinks in their armour. At this point in the siege, some of the Freys and the soldiers would be panicking. Their allies had largely been cut away by Lord Tywin. In a waiting game, the Freys would ultimately lose. That was, of course, the reason Walder Frey had threatened Bran. He was getting worried, desperate, and desperation meant weakness. They only needed a few to get inside the walls in order to make the plan viable, and Jaime Lannister ordered his men to do so by any means necessary. There are ways to break a castle, Jaime said, and I'm sure the twins are rife with conflict right now. Some of Walder Frey's sons did not want any part of this fool's conflict. I can guarantee that. But will they be willing to turn against their father? Robb asked. Depends, Jaime said. I hear he's the worst sort of person. At the end of the week, they heard good news. 3 soldiers had managed to get inside the castle and sent a 4th back to report. In proper disguises, they would be able to slip unnoticed through the twins, and they would be able to create an open to let Robb and James party inside. On top of that, they would be able to see how things really were inside the keep. The report was favourable. Nearly all of Walder Frey's sons were in a panic. They had expected to grapple with the North but not Tywin Lannister. That was not part of the plan. In fact, very few of them even seemed to know the plan. They were looking for a way out of this, and apparently Walder Frey's threat against Bran was some sort of latch-ditch gamble to lure Robb into the castle, in hopes of cutting the head off of the Northern Army. Everything about this seems so terribly executed, Robb said. There's no strategy to all of this. Do you think Walder Frey's age is catching up with him? It's possible, Jaime said. He has always disliked my father, but he had the good sense to fear him. Still, the man is close to 100. He is, Robb tapped on his map, feeling a wave of irritation rise up in him. This feels too easy, all of it. Sometimes it is easy, Jaime said. Sometimes people are stupid. So you don't get a bad feeling from all of this? Robb asked. Jaime sighed, running his fingers along his golden hand. I do, I'm just trying to ignore it. Robb felt like he was walking into a trap, yet he knew that couldn't be true. He had not told anyone about his plan. Walder Frey would not expect him, and most of the Northern Lords would not expect him to go the twins. He fed them the false information and let them protest amongst themselves. He told no one the truth. There were a few who he was sure he could trust, of course. The Reeds, the Glovers, the Mormonts. But he could not risk anyone getting suspicious of his movements. He watched the Bolton representative as he did, but they gave nothing away. Soon enough their window of opportunity was upon them. Walder Frey accepted Robb's offer of sending his mother to negotiate in exchange for a stop on all attacks until the negotiations were at their end. He did not seem to expect a trap. To him, Robb was a stupid boy sending his mother to do his work for him, just like during the war. Robb expected that Walder Frey had a rather low opinion of his intelligence, but that was all right. He could use that. A few days before the meeting, Jaime gave him a full report. The spies they had sent inside of the castle had bought them entrance. One of Walder Frey's grandsons, Robert Frey, was finished with his father's foolish battle and wanted his family out of the keep before things got bad. They helped to smuggle out his wife and 2 children. In exchange, the son would make sure the gate was unguarded at the appointed time. To ensure his loyalty, his family would be held in the Lannister camp as hostages until he delivered on the deal. Robert Frey did not know his father's full plan or motives. He could not say what Walder Frey's end goal was or where he was keeping Bran and Arya. Walder Frey had not told most of his children his whole plan and had seemed especially on edge ever since the Lannister army's arrival. Paranoid, desperate. Most of us are in the dark, Robert Frey had told the men. Truly, this is my grandfather's game and only a few of his sons know the whole board. Most of us want this nonsense to end. Regardless of how many Freys were guilty, Robb was ready and willing to kill any of those who stood against him. Until he had his family back, it did not matter. The plan was set. They would move in small groups dressed as Frey soldiers and gather outside the back gate while Robb's mother approached the front. Then the gate would open for them, courtesy of Robert Frey, and they would enter the keep, catching the unprepared Frey soldiers by surprise. The spies would set fire to their supplies at the same time, eliminating any chance of a successful siege. Then they would find Walder Frey and force him to surrender. It sounded straightforward on paper, but there were still many ways this could go wrong. Walder Frey could realize what was happening and kill one or both of his hostages. The Freys could see them moving and suspect treachery. Robert Frey could lose his spine and tell the plan to one of his brothers. Of course, his family was held hostage, but sometimes men said foolish things when they were nervous. The night before the meeting, Robb spoke with his mother in his tent, reminding her once again to be careful. You can say it as many times as you want, Robb, she told him. It won't make this any safer. You'll be in as much danger as me. She smiled softly. Trust me and trust yourself. We'll get Bran and Arya back. She spoke with such certainty that Robb almost believed it. He had to believe it. He had to believe this would work. That next evening, as the sun was about to fall, Robb watched from a distance as his mother approached the bridge, accompanied by a small group of guards. He wanted them enter and he watched the gates close. It's time, Jaime murmured to his right. Yes, Robb placed his helmet on his head. It's time. The flooded gate was set at the base of the western keep, named because the river flooded the stairs at its base. It was meant to allow Freys easy access to their river boats in situations such as this. If one needed to make an escape from a dangerous siege, they could climb aboard a boat and sneak away under cover of darkness. It was less exposed than the bridge after all. However, this gate was less guarded than the others. Archers could not see it clearly because the bridge blocked it from sight, and since it was marked by a narrow stairwell, it was easy to defend against any invaders who did manage to break through the portcullis. Fortunately for Robb, that was taken care of. There were no guards in the stairwell and they found the gate open for them. And so, 24 men climbed easily up the stairwell and into the eastern courtyard. It was empty besides a couple of men and they both bowed their heads at them when they arrived. Their spies. Robert Frey stood between them. Cleared as promised, he muttered. One of your men set a fire on the other side of the keep, small enough to look like an accident. I sent the guards here to help contain it. Well done, Jaime said. Seems you've held up your end of the bargain. When this is over, so long as you keep your tongue in check, you and your family will be free to go. Robert Frey exhaled and nodded. Good, that's good. Where's your father right now? Where is he meeting my mother? Robb asked. The Great Hall, Robert said. There will certainly be soldiers there, but not many. He's not expecting resistance from your mother. What about Bran and Arya? Robb asked. Have you found out where they are? Only the boy, Robert Frey said. He's being kept in the West Wing under strict guard. I'm not sure about the girl. That worried Robb. Why keep them far away from each other? And wouldn't it be common knowledge in the keep where Arya was being kept? Unless she's already dead, he thought. No, he wouldn't allow himself to think of that. No time for that now. They could find out exactly where she was once they reached Walder Frey. All right, Robb looked to Jaime. I'll take my men to the Great Hall with Robert Frey's guidance. You will find Bran and, if possible, Arya. Then meet me in the Great Hall. Done, Jaime nodded once. Good luck to you, Lord Stark. And you, Lannister, Robb said. With any luck at all, they could end this pointless conflict today. He could find out who had conspired with Lord Frey and have grounds to accuse and execute any northern traitors. Then he could go home. They were almost at the end of this madness. Earlier, Sansa was not content to sit still. When Robb and her mother left along with the armies of 4 months ago, she spent the first month playing the role she was meant to play. She and Talisa looked after Winterfell and handled the accounts which were always complicated in winter. They checked their supplies and discussed rations for the remaining winter with Maester Luwin. And of course, Sansa helped manage the children, all the while pretending that her older brother was not at war and her younger brother and sister were not hostages. Then the letter came from Jon. It was a letter for Robb, meant to update them on the progress against Mance Rayder. The Northmen were successfully holding back many of their attacks and were able to withstand a devastating blow from the rear as well. The Lord Commander had fallen in the battle, and Jon had taken to leading much of the charge. He expected they had a long conflict still ahead of them. Mance Rayder showed no sign of surrender, not with such a massive army. He expressed concern about Robb. Apparently, some of the men abandoned the wall because they were needed in the south, including the Boltons. It was that little note about House Bolton that set Sansa's mind to work. If the war down south was going badly, Robb would have sent a note to Winterfell. It was strange for the Boltons to fight at the wall but suddenly pull back their forces, especially when they had so eagerly supported the fight against the wildlings. Unless they wanted northern soldiers going north, she thought. Yes, that made sense. They wanted to split Robb's forces and promised their own men to put Robb's suspicions at ease. Meanwhile, they could pull back their men once Robb was already south and prepare them. For what? An attack from the rear. They must have allies, or they would not have tried this, Sansa thought. House Bolton was formidable, but they could not fight the north on their own. They surely had other allies who were displeased with Robb. She had to find out whom before they made their move. Sansa sent a note back to Jon asking for details. Which northern house hadn't sent men to the wall, which northern houses had only sent a small number, and which houses had pulled back with House Bolton. She wanted all of their names. Soon enough, Jon replied to her letter with a list. House Dustin and House Ryswell had sent very few men. House Bolton and House Umber had sent a great many men but pulled several back. House Karstark, House Manderley and House Locke had sent none. It wasn't certainty of guilt. But she could not and would not wait around to find out. She had to find some way to judge their loyalty and send word to Robb. That next day she called the women of Winterfell to her. Many of them had husbands fighting in the war. Several more had lost their husbands in the wars of the past. Sansa had grown to know these women well in her past few years. She used to not pay attention to most of them, back when she was vain and thought mostly of herself. But after watching Cersei in King's Landing, she realized that she did not want to become like her, powerful but hated. She wanted to be loved, and to be loved she had to care for those around her. She knew all of their names, she knew all of their stories, she considered them her friends. Now she could only hope that they would help her. "I want to apologize," Sansa said. "I'm about to ask something rather dangerous of some of you. I won't force you to accept, but you would have my eternal thanks if you did." "We're used to danger, my lady," one of the women said. Willa was her name. "We've lived it for the past several years. We'll live it again if it helps you." Sansa smiled sadly. "I thank you. It has come to my attention that there are traitors in the north. House Bolton is the most certain of those traitors, likely their leader. But there are others who have betrayed House Stark and sworn themselves to the flayed man. They may be plotting against us as we speak." The women looked amongst each other. Sansa could see the concern in their eyes, and the confusion. What are we to do about that, they seemed to wonder. She understood. Often as a woman it was easy to feel powerless in war. "I don't want any uncertainties, though. I want the names of the traitors so I can warn Robb and he can fight them before it's too late," Sansa said. "I'd like to send some of you to the suspected houses to gather information. If you can find a certain list of traitors, then Robb can deal with them before they cause trouble." "Why ask us?" a soft voice asked. Jane Poole, Sansa's friend from childhood, had lost her father around the same time Sansa lost hers, down south at King's Landing. "We're women, they don't tend to notice us," Sansa said. "We can use that to our advantage." After all, Cersei Lannister had done the same. She used women as her eyes and ears throughout King's Landing. Women who most people did not care to notice. Women who could giggle and look pretty and non-threatening. Sansa didn't want to be Cersei Lannister, but that didn't mean she couldn't learn from her. "I won't force any of you to do this," Sansa said. "But if you're willing to go, to help my family and your husbands and sons step forward." Nearly everyone stepped forward. Those that didn't, Sansa offered a smile. "I understand, go about your days." Once they had left, Sansa was left with a group of 10 women. The families I am about to name are suspected but not surely guilty. House Umber, House Dustin, House Ryswell, House Karstark, House Manderley and House Locke. Of course, House Bolton is our most major suspect, but I will not send any of you to the Dreadfort. It will be the most dangerous. It's safer to gather information from their potential allies. "Send me to the Dreadfort, lady," one of the women spoke up. It was Osha, lingering in the back corner, leaned up against the wall. The wildling woman had been just as restless as Sansa since Bran was taken. She was one of Bran's close companions for several years after all, and she protected him during the Greyjoy rebellion. "I don't fear the Boltons. I'll find out exactly what you need." "If you're caught, you'll die," Sansa said. "Won't be caught then," Osha said. "They don't know my face. Lord Robb had me stay hidden inside when the Northmen came. I'll be a stranger to them. Besides, I've known worse than Boltons beyond the wall. I know how to make all kinds of men talk." Sansa hesitated. Bran would not be happy if Osha died. He did enjoy the wildling woman's company, yet she didn't think she could stop Osha either. At last she nodded. "Be careful, they must not know that we suspect them." Osha nodded once. "They won't." Sansa gave assignments to the other women. She sent them places that would not know their face. She sent them in pairs in some cases to the larger houses. She bid them return to her with whatever information they could as soon as possible. Then when they had left Winterfell, Sansa was made to wait again. She waited for good news. She waited for bad news. She tried to distract herself with the children and with Tallisa's company. Tallisa was just as worried about Robb. But they tried not to dwell on the worst possible outcomes. The 2 women she sent to White Harbour returned first. They found no evidence of treachery in the Manderley house. They did not send men to the wall because they believed her brother was exaggerating the issue, and they believed the Freys were much more pressing. The woman she sent to House Dustin returned with a similar report. But soon enough, her search began to pay off. Jane Poole returned with a treacherous letter written to one of the Karstarks from Roose Bolton, claiming that Robb was unfit to rule the north. Another woman returned with evidence that House Umber, divided in their support of Robb, had sent those loyal to him to the wall to fight against Mance Rayder in order to get them out of the way. Then they left those men to fight when they pulled back their forces. And most incriminating of all, Osha returned with a list of names and an account of a dark plot. It was Osha's account, the names of the traitors and the Bolton's true plan, which sent Sansa rushing for quill and parchment, her heart beat thundering in her ears. She kept the note short and to the point, naming every one of the traitorous houses and her evidence, and she wrote of the treacherous plot. Then she handed the letter to a messenger and directed him to deliver it directly to Robb or her mother. "What if they are not present?" the messenger asked. Sansa thought for a long moment. She did not know who else they could trust in the north, and she did not want to risk rousing suspicion. But she knew of one person who was invested in Arya's well-being, if only because of his plans. "If you cannot find Robb or my mother, then give the letter to Tywin Lannister," Sansa said. "Jaime Lannister if you cannot find his father." Lady," the rider seemed confused. "Trust me," Sansa said. "Just make sure one of them gets it." The rider did not protest any longer. He set out at a full gallop from the keep, and Sansa watched him go from the battlements. She could only pray he reached Robb in time for him to act. Chapter 41, The True Enemy. The letter arrived just before sunset, when Catelyn and Robb Stark had already put their plan into motion. Tywin waited in his tent to hear if they had succeeded or failed in their endeavour. He expected word would reach him quickly, and if Robb Stark died, the northern traitors would make themselves known at once. He tapped his fingers against the table, glancing ever so often at the broken king sitting at its edge. Walder Frey had not once mentioned Arya, and it was bothering him. If he truly took her to spite him, then he should have sent word. Unless of course she was dead, and he worried about Tywin finding out. Tywin was saved from thinking too long about that possibility when one of his guards entered his tent. "Sir, a rider from Winterfell." "From Winterfell?" Tywin asked. "Why are they at my camp?" "Apparently, if they could not find Lord Stark or his mother, they were told to come to you." That was strange indeed. Who had sent this word from Winterfell? Tywin did not reply for a moment before he nodded once. "Send them in." The rider was stiff and nervous when he entered. As if he himself did not understand his order, he clutched a letter tight in his hand. "Word from Lady Sansa. She says it's urgent, and no one could tell me where Robb Stark was so." Sansa Stark. Tywin had only seen her briefly when she was preparing to leave King's Landing. By all accounts, but mostly by Cersei's, she was a soft-hearted, timid girl with a naive mind. But even the most foolish northern girl would not direct a rider to him without some purpose. "Robb Stark will return shortly. I will pass it on to him then." Tywin gestured quickly. "Give it here." The rider obeyed, and Tywin split the seal with his thumb. If it was urgent, it would not be wise to wait until Robb or his mother returned. And Sansa Stark clearly had reason not to trust the northern lords if she sent the messenger to him. He read the letter once and was amazed by what the girl had discovered. He read the letter twice and knew at once that he had to act. Here she listed the traitors to the north and her evidence. Traitors who had come south with Robb, likely waiting for their opportunity to strike. And right now, Robb Stark had ordered a cease on all attacks. Tywin stood and snapped his fingers at his guard. "Call my generals to prepare for a fight. We need the cavalry." The guard blinked in surprise, but the temporary truce will not be honoured by everyone. Goes now. The guard did not question again. He fled the tent and immediately began raising the call to arms. The messenger stood, wide-eyed, in the middle of the tent, wondering what his delivery had just caused. "Sansa Stark was right to send you here," Tywin said as he stood and armed himself, "and your lord will thank you before the night is done." Then he swiftly exited the tent. He needed his horse. Catelyn had learned how to carry herself through every emotion in the world. Grief, anger, fear. A woman had no choice but to learn how to contain such feelings and keep her head held high. If she cried, she was hysterical. If she shouted, she was overreacting. If she trembled, she was weak. So from a young age, she learned to keep her chin lifted and her shoulders back. Even if she was afraid, she would never give her enemies the chance to see it. She had called upon her strength the last time she set foot into the great hall of the twins, to negotiate with a man who did not respect her. She buried down her disgust and bargained with him on Robb's behalf. At that time, she did not fear for her life. She only feared that their armies would be delayed, and Tywin Lannister would have too much time to prepare for their approach. Now she did fear for her life. If Walder Frey was willing to go this far, he would not hesitate to kill her. But still she steeled herself and followed his men calmly through the gates, then through the narrow courtyard, then into the great hall. Walder Frey sat in his great chair. He looked especially haggard, hunched like a gnarled old tree that had survived far too many storms. He was an ill-made creature, yet somehow he had survived to be nearly 100. Many more good men had died in his lifetime, including her husband. Yet this wretched man who had conspired to murder her son, he lived on. He lived long enough to take her children hostage. A few of his sons stood in the room, all of them armed. One was holding Bran by the waist. He had a knife in his hand, and Bran could not struggle or fight back. Her son looked at her and shook his head, and Catelyn gave him a soft, encouraging smile. "It will be okay. If he chooses to kill one of us, I will make him choose me, but you will live." Bran opened his mouth as if to try to say something, but his captor pressed a blade to his throat, and he quieted. "So," he looked up at her past his thin hair when she stopped in front of him, "your son sends you to bargain for him again. This is a familiar sight." "As if my son would fool enough to come into your hall," Catelyn said. "You would have killed him." "Maybe, but maybe I'll kill you instead. Have you thought of that?" Walder Frey asked. "Yes. And you're still here?" "Yes." Walder Frey scratched his head. "I was going to kill the young wolf. That was the plan. Now I'm not sure what the plan is. I think it ends in me losing. Whether I kill you or not, I lose." "You can surrender," Catelyn said. "Give back Bran and Arya. End this nonsense." "I don't think that will end well for me either," Walder Frey said. "I'll lose my head at the least. Unless you plan to send me to the wall, don't think I'd like that." "You'll die, yes," Catelyn said. "And what do you care? Your life has been twice that of an ordinary man, 4 times that of some of the men you've sent to die for you. It's the least you can do for your family. Surrender and soften the blow." "Soften the blow of Tywin Lannister? That's unlikely," Walder Frey said. "He was never soft once in his life. I remember him, 10 years old, and he looked down his nose at me like I was nothing. Never saw a boy born so proud, especially from such a weak-willed father. Amazing that he deigned to look to me for help at all when your boy went to war with him because it was convenient. He'll use even his worst enemies when it's convenient." His laugh sounded more like a cough. "See. He's working with Starks now." Catelyn studied him carefully. She had never seen Walder Frey so unhinged. Perhaps he really was going senile. Perhaps he did not expect Tywin Lannister to come in such force. But then why send Arya's fingers to him? He must have known that such a challenge would be repaid. "Lord Walder," she said at last, "if you know that it is hopeless, then why delay the inevitable? The longer you wait, the more your family suffers. End this now." "I could do that," Lord Walder said, "or I could take as many of you fucking Starks with me as possible." He glanced at Bran. "What would Robb Stark do then?" Catelyn took a step forward, opening her mouth to protest. Then the east side door slammed open, and one of Walder Frey's sons scrambled inside. "Fire! There's a fire." "A fire?" Walder Frey blinked. "Well, what are you bothering me for? Put it out and be done with it." "It hit our supply stores," the son said. "I think it must be some sort of attack. We won't be able to keep up the siege." "We're already losing, you fool. The supplies only delay it all." Walder looked to Catelyn again. "Of course, it is an interesting thought. What if the honourable Starks agreed to negotiate peace and then broke that agreement?" He laughed again. "Wouldn't be the first broken vow, I suppose. Still, I thought you lot were supposed to be honourable, but the North is so full of dishonour these days." "Don't speak to me of honour," Catelyn said. "You have forsaken your vow to my family. You have forsaken the laws of man. You would have killed my son even if he came under a banner of peace. I'm not sure there is a man in the world less honourable than you." Walder shook his head. "Are you sure about that, Lady Stark? Because I think the Boltons might surprise you." Again the door slammed open, this time from behind Catelyn. She heard the sound of throats slit and men screaming in pain. She let out a breath as Robb strode through the door. 2 soldiers on either side of him had arrows drawn and aimed at Walder Frey. "Lord Frey," he said flatly, "I came to negotiate for peace." "Be careful," Catelyn said. "He has Bran." Robb glanced to the side and noticed Bran held tight in the grip of one of Walder's sons. "Order your son to drop my brother. Now." "What if I do?" Walder Frey asked. "What will it earn me? Not my life." "No," Robb said, but the lives of some of your family, if you care about any of them, that is." He kept his bow steady. "If you don't release Bran and Arya, I'll kill every man in this bloody castle." "You keep asking for two," Walder murmured. "Two captives." "Yes," Catelyn said. "You took Bran and Arya from Winterfell." "Did I?" Walder tapped his long nails against the edge of his chair. "I only see the boy here." "Then order your son to drop him. Now I won't ask again." "Robb," Bran choked out. His captor hissed and shook him. "Shut up, don't speak." Catelyn's brow furrowed. Why were they so concerned with keeping Bran quiet? "There's something funny about you being here, Lord Stark," Walder Frey continued. "Do you know what it is?" "Enlighten me," Robb said. "You're cheating your traitors out of their prize, Walder Frey. You should take a look, over the wall." Robb's eyes narrowed, but he did not waver. "Lord Frey, last chance." Walder Frey smiled. "You're right, it is my last chance. At least I can kill one Stark." He glanced at his son. Catelyn felt herself go cold with panic and she stepped forward. "No." A sword tip broke through the Frey son's mouth and he shuddered, releasing Bran, who crumbled to the ground, gasping. Alive, he was still alive. "That was lucky," Jaime Lannister said from behind the now dead man. "I figured they might have brought the boy here. I see I was right." Catelyn released a breath, almost losing her feet from the relief. She hurried to Bran, who was trying to right himself on the floor. There was a shallow cut on his neck, but nothing serious. "Did they cut him?" Robb asked. "Only a bit," Catelyn said. "It's barely bleeding." Catelyn drew Bran into her arms. "Oh, Bran, I'm so sorry." Robb glanced at Jaime. He could have cut Bran's throat as he fell. "But he didn't," Jaime said. "You have a strange way of saying thank you in the north." "Thank you, sir," Catelyn said. "Truly." Jaime's expression sobered and he nodded once. "You're welcome." He glanced down at Bran, a rather strange look on his face. "You're all right, boy." Bran pulled back from Catelyn, nodding once. "I'm fine, thank you, sir." Jaime's jaw seemed to clench for a moment. Then he nodded and strode toward Walder Frey. "So, Lord Frey, I am awfully interested to know what your end goal was here, because every way I put it together you seem completely mad." "It wasn't really my plan. Not in the end," Walder Frey looked up at them. "Really, one of your sons take over the show?" Jaime nodded at the corpse of the man he had just stabbed. "Was it that one? I hope so." "Like I told Lord Stark," Walder Frey rasped out another one of his horrid laughs. "You ought to look over the wall." The door burst open and one of Robb's men entered, looking breathless. "We've secured the castle. The Freys surrendered." "That's good news," Robb said. "But his expression does not match it," Jaime said. "What happened?" The messenger shook his head. The northern camp, you should just come and see." Robb and Jaime glanced at each other, then hurried from the room. Catelyn wanted to go after them, but she had to see to Bran. "Mother," Bran said, "Arya." "Yes, where is she?" Catelyn asked. "We'll find her and bring her home." "That's what I was trying to tell you," Bran said. "Arya's not here." Slowly, Catelyn let out a shaky breath and closed her eyes. No, of course it could not be over so easily. "Look over the wall," Walder Frey had said. "You ought to look over the wall." He had said many things that didn't quite make sense. It seemed like the ramblings of a madman. Looking over the wall, Robb felt as if he might be going mad as well. There was fire in the northern camp and soldiers clashing. Not Frey soldiers, though. Northmen fighting each other. "Seven hells," Jaime muttered under his breath, which did not begin to cover the situation. "It wasn't really my plan," Walder Frey had said. "Not in the end." No, Robb was beginning to believe him. He had delivered the same message to almost all of his men, that they would negotiate peace with Walder Frey, and until negotiations were complete, they would cease attacks. And in those moments of peace, the traitors had taken up their swords to slaughter those loyal to House Stark. From this distance he could make out the place where he kept his tent. It was burning and bodies were strewn about. They had meant for him to be there that night. They would have if he had not insisted on coming here. The thought left Robb frozen. But the moment was brief. There was no time to pause. He gripped his blade tight in his hand. "Gather your men, Sir Jaime, and escort my mother and brother to the Lannister camp." "And you?" Jaime asked. Robb barred his teeth slightly as he replied, "I'm going to handle the traitors." There were already so many northern dead when Robb arrived to the camp. His own men had taken an especially hard blow as they had tried to guard Robb's tent, now crumpled to ash. He swayed on the spot, his grip clenching on the hilt of his sword. Lord Stark. Robb turned to see Lord Glover stumbling toward him, a gash over his eye. Robb's men closed around him, but Robb held up his hand to keep them from attacking. Lord Glover, what happened? Good question, it happened so quickly, Glover said. Suddenly, there were Boltons attacking us, and some others, I think. In the dark, I couldn't tell, came to find you as soon as I escaped. I was away during the beginning of the attack, rescuing Bran from the twins, Robb said. I'm sorry I did not tell you. We've suspected Walder Frey had spies in our camp. I couldn't take chances. Spies Maury like allies, Lord Glover said. The camp is in chaos, as if half of it suddenly turned on us, but we weren't prepared for an attack tonight and it's too dark to see most of the culprits. That's why they attacked, Robb muttered. His head spun. Robb had suspected all along that the northern traitors might be connected to the Freys, and it was a good thing he had not told anyone of his plan. They attacked tonight because they thought they could surprise and kill him. Several of his men had suffered the consequences. Another soldier came coughing out of the smoke. Robb did not know which house this one belonged to. His eyes widened when he saw Robb. My lord, you're all right. We saw your tent and thought. You thought wrong, Robb said. We need to gather the soldiers we can and make a perimeter, elsewise the traitors will try to escape north again. I'm not sure you'll be able to gather enough for a perimeter, Lord Glover said. Or organize our soldiers. We should try to capture as many of the traitors as we can and interrogate them for information. Robb nodded once. It was foolishness to try to rally his men in such chaos. He did not know who he could trust in this crowd anyway. We should make for the northern edge then, see who we can catch running. The men nodded and fell into step behind him. To his left and just behind him, Robb heard the scrape of a sword. He turned in time to see the newest soldier looking at him with cold eyes, preparing to strike. And he turned in time to see the man thrown to the ground by a massive wall of fur. Greywind was upon the man before he could even think of attacking, ripping through his throat. Blood stained his maw and fur. He had taken an arrow to the shoulder, but he was still standing, still fighting. At least he had one friend he could always trust. 7 hells, Lord Glover cursed. Robb swallowed hard as he turned away from the dead men. Stay in close, and if any of you try to betray me, you'll meet the same fate. They ran along the edge of camp with all haste toward the northern side. When they reached their destination, Robb saw that a few men had already begun to run. He watched them disappear through the tree line on horseback. If he had a horse, he might have chased them down himself. Orders, my lord, Lord Glover asked. He had rallied some of his own men on their way. Robb could only pray they were not traitors as well. Spread out evenly and catch who you can, Robb said. Find out what house they serve. Then he cut off at a sound, the sound of hoof-beats. He turned to see a line of cavalry approaching, carrying the Lannister banners high above them. For a moment, Robb got an awful feeling that they were here to help the traitors and that all of this time Tywin Lannister had been playing him for a fool. But instead, they formed a barrier at the northern edge of the camp, lowering pikes to keep anyone from running. A few men skidded to the stop at the sight and backed quickly away. Fuck me, Glover muttered. A trap. No, Robb said. If they meant to kill us, they could cut through the camp right now and kill every northerner they see. Instead, they're just blocking everyone in, including the traitors. Why? Glover asked. And how could they even know what's happening? Robb did not have an answer to that question, but he imagined he'd get one soon as he saw Tywin Lannister riding toward him. You've survived, he said. I have, Robb said. I noticed you had a problem in your camp. Tywin nodded at the line of cavalry. This should give you a chance to handle it. It would. Already at the sight of the Lannister army, the fighting had begun to die as everyone realized that they weren't going anywhere. It will, Robb said at last. Lord Glover, will you assist me in calling my bannermen? We have a lot to discuss. In one of the only large tents left unburnt, Robb stood, facing his bannermen. None would admit readily to being traitors if he accused them. They would all insist it was someone else. They would say their men turned against them. They would accuse each other until the entire north fell apart. He trusted Lord Glover, at least, though tentatively. For all he knew, the man could be waiting to play his cards. I hate this, he thought. I hate not knowing. It seems some of you conspired to kill me tonight, Robb said. Since you failed, I can ask who's to blame. I saw a Karstark cut through our men, Lord Reed replied. A lie, Karstark said. We were defending ourselves against the Reeds, they are the traitors. The Reeds would never betray the Starks, Glover fired back. The Karstarks have been against Robb ever since the war. The Lannisters are to blame, spat an Umber. They put spies in our midst while you've been playing allies with them. They can't be trusted. I'm not the one who can't be trusted. Tywin Lannister's voice came flatly from the entrance of the tent. All of the Northern lords were startled into silence to see him. They had been arguing openly about him for so long, but they never expected him to arrive in their camp. Robb was surprised to see him as well. He had thought Tywin intended to let him deal with the Northern lords alone. It was a test of sorts. You're not welcome here, the Umber muttered in reply. I wouldn't expect to be, Tywin held up a piece of parchment, but I have a letter that was meant for Lord Stark. I think he'll want to read it. Robb's brow furrowed as he studied Lord Tywin. Then he accepted the parchment. This was Sansa's handwriting. He recognized the pretty slope of the letters immediately, but its contents especially, those were what interested him. For a long time he did not speak. Then he lifted his head and looked out coldly at the Northern lords. My sister, it seems, has discovered traitors among you, families that did not send men to the wall but did not send their full forces to me, and families that sent men to the wall but pulled them back after I was gone. How could the Lady Sansa discover such a thing? A Karstark asked. This is clearly a forgery. I have the messenger who brought it. He would gladly tell you otherwise, Tywin said. It's not a forgery. I know my sister's writing. Lord Tywin does not, Robb said. But I understand why you would hope for a fake Karstark. She did name your family after all. House Karstark, House Locke and House Rysewell, the Umbers who are not still at the wall. And the Boltons. You have all betrayed your liege lord and House Stark. You betrayed your countrymen, and for that you will be tried and executed. The effect on the room was palpable. The traitors saw themselves caught in a trap, and those loyal to Robb were overcome with fury. A few Karstarks tried to back away, but Glover blocked them and punched one hard in the face. Lord Rysewell protested. You trust the word of one girl. This is madness. I trust my sister more than you, Robb said. Seize him. Any of you still loyal to House Stark, bind the traitors and guard them carefully. Their men who tried to kill you, pay them back for that. The loyal families were quick to follow the order and the traitors were thankfully outnumbered. Robb had begun to wonder if the whole of his camp was against him. At least, that wasn't the case. You read the remainder of the letter, I trust, Tywin said as the traitors were dragged from the tent. Yes, Robb's hand clenched on the parchment, threatening to tear through it. I did. I need to go north as soon as possible. Everything had clicked into place when he read the letter. The stupidity of Walder Frey sending Lord Tywin the fingers. The confusion when they asked the Frey men about Arya's location. They didn't know because they hadn't sent the fingers. They had been framed. They had been thrown to the lions and wolves while the true enemy watched from a distance and gathered their forces. Even if they found the traitors here, it wasn't enough. The majority of the Bolton army, the Umber army, the Karstarks, they were north. And they were not weary from 4 months of siege. When Robb rode with his loyal followers to meet them, it might not be enough. This mess had been everything the Boltons wanted and more. The Northern army was splintered, the Riverlands once again in ruins. And the Boltons had Arya. Chapter 42, Exposed. 4 months earlier. The pain was excruciating. One moment Arya could feel the rough wood of the table between the tips of 5 fingers. The next only 3. The knife severed the smallest fingers completely, leaving bloody, jagged protrusions of bone behind. If Arya had eaten in the last day, she might have vomited. Instead, she gagged up air and gritted her teeth against the pain. They had done the same to Bran only moments ago. Arya had fought against her captors as her brother pleaded for mercy. His scream hurt her almost as much as the knife had. Mercy, I am showing you mercy, the bastard of Bolton snickered. It's just the little fingers. You can write well enough your other 3, can't you? He glanced at Arya. Not sure well you'll be able to wield a knife, though. He had removed her fingers right after he said that. Arya refused to scream. She bit the inside of her cheek so hard it bled and tears burned at her eyes, but she did not scream. I will not give him the satisfaction. He had liked that, the fact that she didn't cry out. His smile stretched wide as he knelt down to her eye level. You are a little wolf, aren't you? You bare your teeth and snarl when you're in pain. What would it take to make you scream, I wonder? She glared right back at him. Even as blood poured from her hand, there was some victory here. He did not know she was left-handed. No one ever went for her left side. Ramsay Bolton turned to some of his men. I need 2 letters, one for the boys' fingers and one for the girls. Then we'll make arrangements to send Bran Stark south to the frays. I thought your father meant to keep the boy and hand over the girl, the man replied. He did, Ramsay agreed, but the situation has changed. It won't matter either way. Robb Stark will think that both of his siblings are at the twins. Arya met Bran's eyes, panic spreading through her. They meant to separate them. Arya could not protect her little brother if they were separated. What would Walder Frey do to him? It had been some time since Arya had felt so helpless, not since Lord Tywin first took her prisoner, and even then she knew that he would not harm her without a purpose. Ramsay Bolton was not Tywin Lannister. Already he had taken her fingers, and he would take more if he got the chance. There was chaos in his smile and delight in his eyes when he caused pain, like Joffrey perhaps, but more measured, more intelligent than that. She feared him and she hated it. She wanted to tear his smile away with her teeth. She watched as he took her fingers from the table and dropped them into an envelope. Then he gave them to one of his men. See that these are delivered, not by Raven. Ryder, I don't want these lost en route to their recipients. He snapped his fingers at another man. And you take the boy and transport him south in a barrel. Make sure no one sees him, and make sure doesn't make a sound. Ramsay passed near Bran and ruffled his hair. Take another finger if he screams. Arya struggled against her captor again. Damn them, she would kill them all. Oh, and if you're caught en route, you say that Walder Frey sent you, Ramsay added. If you mention the name Bolton, I'll kill everyone who has ever spoken to you. He wants to blame Frey for this, Arya thought. The Freys may be working with them, but the Boltons owe them no loyalty. What is his play here? She didn't know. She could not begin to know what he had planned, but she was beginning to see his motives. He had showed support of Jon's plan so that the Northern army would be divided. She doubted they intended to go to the wall, or if they did it would not be for very long. They only wanted to make sure loyal houses sent their soldiers away. Robb was in danger. Her whole family was in danger, and she was stuck here, another hostage. She was short on weapons and 2 of her fingers, and she couldn't do a damn thing. The man charged with delivering Bran to the Freys began to pick him up and carry him away. Bran could do nothing to fight back but squirm weakly. Arya gritted her teeth together. The man behind her had stopped pushing so hard on her back, and his foot. She jammed her heel back onto his toe before throwing herself to the side. She slipped from beneath the man's grasp and hit the ground rolling. Then she ran for Bran. He moved in front of Arya before she could reach her brother. Ramsay. He slid into her path, a shadow with a freshly cleaned knife. Arya hissed and sidestepped just in time to avoid his blade. It sliced so close, she was sure he'd cut off a strand of her hair. You do have good reflexes, Ramsay cooed. His voice sent a shiver of revulsion through her. Good instincts, not just a wolf in name, are you? Arya, Bran called out to her as the door to the hall began to close. Arya looked past Ramsay for a split second, trying to get a glimpse of her brother again, wanting to reassure him that things would be okay. Don't ignore me. Arya ducked narrowly as Ramsay's blade cut a wide arc just above her head. She took a deep breath and found her footing again, retreating quickly from his attacks. But he was quick too. He kept advancing on her with his blade, stabbing and slashing in quick succession. Each time she only narrowly dodged, but he was driving her backward and she did not have a weapon. Not to mention her hand was throbbing with pain and the blood loss was beginning to make her dizzy. Fuck, I can't keep this up for long. His knife whistled past her right shoulder. I can't see straight. Her back hit a wall and Ramsay's grinned. Bad luck, little wolf. Her eyes widened as he flipped the blade in his hand. I'm going to die. Ramsay. The Bolton bastard's blade buried itself in the wall right next to Arya's face. If she only turned slightly to the side, she could see her reflection there. But she did not turn. She glared straight ahead into Ramsay Bolton's eyes. He grinned at her, then slowly withdrew. Yes, father. Arya glanced to the side to see Roose Bolton had entered the room, looking rather irritated. She could see the resemblance between the father and son. Roose Bolton carried himself with an air of dignity and calm, but his eyes still spoke of cruelty. He had just learned to control it. Rams let his malice spill out from his smile and eyes like an overflowing cup. I am in a very dangerous place, Arya thought. I saw you decided to send Bran Stark to Walder Frey instead of Arya. Why is that? I don't think Walder Frey can handle much more than a crippled hostage, Ramsay said. This one has more bite than her little brother. Lord Walder won't be able to keep her caged properly. Arya gritted her teeth together. Ramsay had only been toying with her, testing her skills, and now he had a good idea of what she could do. Now that he knew she was dangerous, her element of surprise was lost. Fuck, this was bad. Whether he can keep her caged isn't my worry, Roose said. Do you want Tywin Lannister turning his eyes on us, truly? It won't be a problem, Ramsay said. He'll be focused on the Freys long before he realizes that we have Arya. I've already sent the letters ahead. As far as he knows, Walder Frey has 2 hostages and we have none at all. Yes, and when he inevitably breaks the twins, he will realize the truth, Roose said. That was the purpose of sending Arya Stark to the Freys. With his ward back in hand, Lord Tywin would have little reason to help the Starks deal with us. Do you really think I want to invoke the full wrath of the Lannisters and the Starks combined? Are you a complete fool? Ramsay almost seemed to flinch at these words, and the hate burned brighter in his eyes. Tywin Lannister will find out that we worked with the Freys, and that we helped to capture his ward. You say that she has his favour, then she's the best hostage we can have. If Tywin Lannister rides north, we need someone he actually likes at the knife point. Besides, he can't like her all that much. A man of his reputation. That's a dangerous gamble, Ramsay. Dangerous gambles win wars, Ramsay retorted. We can afford to be reckless. Besides, especially with that lucky problem at the wall coming to sweep away half of the northern soldiers, they'll be weak. You assume your opponent's weakness. It weakens you in the process. It would do you well to be afraid of someone every once and a while, Roose said coldly. No matter, we'll keep the girl, but you won't take any more of her fingers. We need her unharmed for when the armies come marching for us. Arya's left hand clenched into a fist as Ramsay looked back at her. Seems you get to stay with us, little wolf. Burn in hell, Arya replied. Ramsay laughed. She doesn't speak like a lady, does she? Or fight like one, like I said. She's much more like an animal than a girl. And you're more like a rabid dog than a man, Roose said. I'm serious, Ramsay. Do not harm her until we have more clarity about the future. You ought to apply a little self-control just this once. Ramsay frowned, spinning his knife in his hand and returning it to his sheath. The idea of self-control seemed to personally offend him. Yes, father, as you say. Exactly what are you planning to do? Arya asked. The Bolton army isn't strong enough to stand against the whole north and the Lannisters and their allies. You think one hostage will really keep you safe? One hostage can make a great deal of a difference. You should know that, Roose Bolton said. Didn't your brother surrender his crown for you, Lady Arya? Arya swallowed a lump in her throat. Yes, he had. Besides, it won't be the whole north, Roose said. Half of the north has gone to the wall to defend against the wildlings. Ramsay and your bastard brother did quite a good job of convincing them. And the other half of the north will leave to deal with the Freys in a few days' time. They'll wear themselves out at the siege and give us time to prepare here. Then they will lose most of their men there when the Umbers, Rhyseuels, Locks and the Karstarks turn against your brother. When the moment is right. If we're lucky, Robb Stark will die before he ever returns north. Arya felt her blood turn to ice. 7 hells, this wasn't some stupid gambit for the north. This was a carefully planned strategy. And it wasn't just the Boltons who had turned against her brother. The Karstarks who had lost their patriarch to Robb's blade years ago during the war. And the Umbers, one of the largest house in the north, who had been furious when Robb bent the knee. They planned to take control of the north themselves, and Robb would have his eyes squarely fixed on the Freys. Why, she asked at last, you fought with my father, the Boltons have served the Starks for 1,000 years, why do you turn against us now? Because your brother is weak. He broke a vow for a love marriage and he bent the knee to the south for the life of a little girl, Roose Bolton said. The north needs strong leadership. And if you've read any book about the north at all, you'll know the Boltons have a long history of fighting the Starks, Ramsay said, packing toward the windows on the right side of the hall. Light was filtering through the windows, reflecting off the blade of his knife. Was it sunrise or sunset? Arya could not tell. The Red Kings of old would be quite happy with us. But my father, Arya started. To be entirely honest, your father was not strong either, Roose said. I've been thinking for some time that perhaps the Starks do not deserve to be wardens of the north. House Bolton is just as ancient a family. There's no real reason that the Boltons should not take power again in the face of Stark weakness. My brother is not weak, Arya muttered. He is stronger than both of you combined, and my family will rip yours apart. A very scary thought, Ramsay grinned. But disassembling enemies is really more a Bolton specialty, little wolf. Really, have you seen what wolves do to dogs? Arya asked through gritted teeth. Ramsay's eyes narrowed, and his grip seemed to tighten on his knife again. How she wished she had a knife of her own. The Starks would already be destroyed if Lord Tywin did not find you, Roose said before Ramsay could make a retort. You've only delayed the inevitable. What are you talking about? Arya's eyes narrowed. If Tywin Lannister hadn't used you to force peace, he would have ended the war some other way, Roose said. He was writing to us, and to the Freys. Lord Walder planned to host a wedding at the Twins and offer his support to Robb. Then, with your brother's mind at ease, we would have killed him and all of his men. Lord Tywin promised us the North and the Riverlands for our efforts. A wedding, Arya almost whispered the words. To kill someone in such a manner went against every single law of the gods. But of course, Lord Tywin had never cared much about that. She remembered, years ago, he had mentioned he had another way to end this war. He told her about it in his tent a few days before he dangled her in front of Robb. You may be the difference between your brother choosing the right path or the wrong one. I promise you, if he rejects my offer, he and your mother will die. It won't be clean, it won't be honourable, but it will end the war, and that's all I care about right now. Of course, Robb had accepted the terms of surrender, and in doing so Tywin had cast aside the Boltons and the Freys, pawns he no longer needed, but the pawns had not gone away. This was not a game of Cyvasse after all. Instead, the fallen pieces plotted with each other and decided to make themselves into kings. Not that it matters now, Roose Bolton said. That path is lost, but the Boltons will have the North again with or without the Lannisters' help. And you'll help us to get it. He regarded her with a stony expression. You should be accustomed to this by now, being used to win wars. Arya's lip curled. She wanted to lunge at him, but she was unarmed and she could barely keep her feet because of the lost blood. This was not the time to fight, not the time to play the few remaining cards she had. She'd already revealed her speed and reflexes to Ramsay. She could not reveal anything else. Roose Bolton snapped his fingers at two guards standing at the edge of the room. Escort Lady Arya to her chambers and see to her fingers. Make sure the room is stripped of all possible weapons and post 2 guards at the door at all times. If news of her being here leaves this keep, I will have your tongues ripped out and stuffed down your throat before I flay you alive. And if we return from the wall in a month's time and find her gone, your punishment will be worse. The guards nodded once and moved toward Arya, taking her by the arms. Must we still go to the wall? She heard Ramsay ask as she was dragged away. Seems a good way to lose valuable men. Not going is a good way to rouse suspicions, Roose said. Try not to let a wildling shoot you down. I hope the wildlings shoot all of you down, Arya thought. She let out a shaky breath, trying to keep focus as the guards led her from the room and down the hall. But no matter how she concentrated, she could not see a way out of this. Once again she was being used against her family, a hostage, a pawn in someone else's game. A wolf locked in a cage. Chapter 43, Fear and Hatred. Arya's captors were smart. They had heard enough rumours about her and seen the knife she carried. They knew not to give her anything to work with, so her room at the Dreadfort was stripped bare. All he had was a bed, a desk and an empty shelf. Not a single sharp object in sight, not even a stray sewing needle or a loose nail. She had only a single narrow window, too small to possibly use as an escape. Through that window she could watch the light change and count the days passing. The rise and fall of the sun was all that changed in that tiny room for the first month. Occasionally, a guard came to bring her food, but they gave her no utensils that she could use against them, and they always entered prepared for an attack. All of her guards had been informed that she was not some docile lady. One of Arya's greatest advantages had always been her unassuming appearance. Jaime had mentioned as much to Brienne, and he was completely right. People had been underestimating her all her life, even when she wanted to be taken seriously. That gave her the element of surprise. It was surprise that allowed her to protect Tommen, to kill those assassins, to draw a confession from Littlefinger. It was surprise that had kept her alive for this long. The Boltons did not intend to let her surprise them. They were treating her as a serious threat, and that gave her very few opportunities for escape. She had always wanted people to take her seriously, but this was the very worst time for it to happen. For the first month, Arya was totally isolated. She saw only the guards who brought her food at unpredictable times. It was maddening to be left alone with nothing but her thoughts for company. And then Ramsay Bolton came to visit. She had already eaten dinner, so she knew something was off when she heard the lock rattling. At first, she worried it might be a guard eager to take liberties with a hostage. She stood to meet the guest before they even opened the door, placing herself in the center of the room, ready to defend if they came at her. Ramsay Bolton stepped through the door, smirking. "Were you waiting for me, little wolf?" Arya's eyes narrowed. She would have preferred a guard. Then at least she could catch them by surprise. But not this man. "I was waiting for trouble. It just happens to be wearing your face. What are you doing here?" "I'm back from the wall. Perhaps I came to see how you are adjusting," Ramsay said. "That would be considerate of you, if it were true," Arya said. "Except for you're in the midst of planning a rebellion, I doubt you would come for something so trivial." Ramsay laughed once. "Well, even in the midst of a war, one does need to take time for amusements." He tilted his head to the side, studying her. "And you are very amusing." Arya clenched her jaw. "Am I?" "Yes, you're such a curiosity, little wolf," Ramsay said. "Your reflexes, for instance, you've clearly trained regularly. As a hostage of the Lannisters, I wonder how you gained permission for that." "I didn't need permission," Arya said. "Yes, you did. It would have been easy enough to stop you," Ramsay said. "For instance, right now you do not have permission, so you can't practice." Arya's eyes narrowed. Technically he was right. She didn't have a weapon and this space was too small for her to really practice footwork. She could keep herself strong and flexible, but little else. "It frustrates you, I'm sure. Wolves don't like to be in cages," Ramsay said, "but if you'd like to practice, I can oblige." Arya saw the knife a second before he stabbed out at her. She barely redirected the blow, slamming into the corner of the desk as she did. He laughed once. "Oh dear, hard to dodge in close quarters like this, isn't it?" His eyes seemed to glow with delight. "I can't imagine you practiced much in tight spaces. It's much more ideal for the attacker than the defender." "Then give me a weapon, coward," Arya snapped. "No," Ramsay replied, striking out at her again. She leapt backward onto the bed, but he didn't give her much time to find her footing. He rushed forward, his blade flashing in the light. She hopped to the table, trying to get around him and avoid being cornered. But this room had no safe places. Everywhere she turned, she found a new corner. When she tried to slip around Ramsay again, he seized her collar and shoved her hard against the wall. Her head knocked against the stone, and she bit the inside of her cheek to keep herself focused. "I think we've found a gap in your training," Ramsay said. Arya hissed and kicked out at his legs. He dug his knife into her right shoulder in response. Pain blossomed through her arm, and Arya gritted her teeth to keep from screaming. "You're not much of a howler, are you?" Ramsay asked. "I've heard animals make all sorts of sounds when they're cornered and in pain. Humans too, it all blends together. In the moments before death, humans are just animals desperate to survive." He twisted the knife slightly and black spots flashed across Arya's vision. Fuck, it hurt. Desperate animals are the most dangerous because they'll do anything. I've seen wolves chew off their legs to escape a trap. Ramsay tilted his head to the side. "What will you do, little wolf?" Arya growled and head butted him as hard as she could. Her vision flashed white at the impact, but it surprised him enough to force him back. It satisfied her to see the blood streaming from his nose. And yet he still smiled. Arya realized now what his eyes reminded her of. She used to spend a great deal of time studying cats at Sirio's request. Sometimes after they cornered a mouse they toyed with it for a while. They had the little creature in their grasp. All they had to do was bite down. But instead they batted at it, wore it down, let it escape a little before pulling it back. And all the while they watched with wide, curious eyes. Ramsay was exactly like one of those cats, and she wished she could dig his eyes out of his skull with his own knives. "You look so serious, little wolf," he cooed. "Don't worry so much, I won't kill you, I won't even hurt you too badly, because you don't fear death like most, or pain. What you fear is a cage, so all I really have to do to torment you is keep you here." He shrugged. "Besides, we need you alive to use against Tywin Lannister." Tywin Lannister. Even when he was hundreds of miles away, he still had a hand in her life. It was his supposed favour that kept Ramsay from digging his knife somewhere more important. His favour was why they bothered to keep her captive at all. A second daughter of a noble house wasn't that valuable a captive, but a girl in the favour of the head of the Lannister house, that made her very important indeed. Arya's element of surprise had saved her life in many situations, But it was Tywin Lannister who had actually kept her alive thus far. It had kept the soldiers away from her in the camp. It had kept Joffrey from openly setting his guards on her. It had kept Cersei from immediately making a play for her life. And now it kept Ramsay Bolton's blade from her throat. What a horrid realization that was. Arya had done everything she could to grow stronger, but she had only ever gotten the chance to hold a sword because Lord Tywin had allowed it. He could have stopped her practices in an instant. He could have exposed her for killing Joffrey. He held her life in his hand, like a piece in a game of Sivas. She had always known that in the back of her mind, of course. That was half the reason she saved his life in return, to save her brother but also to protect herself from Joffrey. Without Tywin Lannister, she was nothing in the Red Keep, a second daughter, a mere hostage. People didn't treat her well because they feared or respected her. They treated her well because they feared and respected Tywin. Have I always been so powerless? Arya thought. Has my fate always been in someone else's hands? Have I really gotten any stronger? These questions tormented her constantly. They were perhaps the worst thing about being trapped in that room. But then again, Ramsay existed. He kept coming back to visit her, and she had no way to predict his movements. Sometimes he disappeared for a week at a time. Sometimes he visited every day for 3 days in a row. Sometimes he even came back twice in one day, but that was rare. Whatever the case, his visits left her paranoid. When she heard the keys jingling, she always had to wonder, was it food or him, or both? Sometimes it was both. She learned to hate the sound of keys, because that meant Ramsay and his smile and his laugh, and his knife against which she could not defend. He was true to his word, of course. He never damaged her beyond repair, but he did leave little scars behind, some on her skin, some on her mind. Sometimes he came to give her practice. He swung his knife around and forced her to dance around it until he cornered her and left a new wound on one of her arms. But sometimes he just came to talk for a short while, to ask her questions. She never knew which it would be, so she found herself ever tense around him, a cornered animal just as he said. "Always on guard, aren't you? I'm only here to talk. Why so nervous?" Once he came in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. She woke up to his blade at her throat and his hand over her mouth. "You think you're safe in sleep, little wolf," he had purred in her ear. "Monsters love the night time." She jolted up, flailing her arms to knock his blade away. She cut her arm in the process, and he laughed at that. "Now you're just making yourself bleed. You ought to settle down." She did not fall asleep after he left, and for days after the smallest sound could startle her awake. One time he visited with a strangely sombre look on his face. "Lady Arya, has anyone told you the news yet?" "What news?" Arya asked suspiciously. "Oh, no one has. I apologize. I hate to tell you this myself," Ramsay said. "We received word from the Riverlands today." Arya's insides went cold. The Riverlands, the siege, so many of her family was there. Which one had died? Who had joined her father and Rickon in the ground? "I'm not sure how to put this, but your brother—" Which one, Robb or Bran? Which one was he talking about? Ramsay let a long silence hang in the air, and Arya thought her heart might claw its way from her rib cage. "Your brother Robb," Ramsay flashed a wide grin, "is doing just fine. All your family is." Arya released a breath she had been holding for too long. She barred her teeth in a snarl. "I hope you die screaming someday." "I bring good news, and that's your reaction. You're not much of a lady, are you?" He was maddening, and his words were always far sharper than his knife. Arya had dealt with cruel people before. Joffrey, of course, was as cruel as they came, but he was stupid. He lashed out without thought, trying to hurt as many people as he could. Not Ramsay. There was no anger to his methods, no hate. He was patient enough to study her, looking for chinks in her armor. He found the doubts and fears of her mind and dug into them, drawing them all out into the open. The Boltons had a saying, "A naked man has few secrets, a flayed man has none." Ramsay was not allowed to flay Arya, but he was doing his level best to peel away her sanity. He backed her into corners. He tormented her in her dreams. He fanned the flames of her worry for her family. And he pointed out her helplessness again and again and again, until Arya could not help but wonder if she had ever been strong. One time he visited her in the middle of the night. She was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed, staring straight at the door. Waiting. He smiled when he saw her, that awful, wicked smile that she could never get out of her head. "Still awake? Did I visit you in your nightmares?" No, she held his gaze and refused to lift her chin. I'm not afraid of you. He laughed once and shook his head. Yes, you are. Arya swallowed hard and pressed her left fist against her leg. Yes, she was. Ramsay had always enjoyed games. From a very young age he loved to play with others. At first the games were tame, fighting with sticks, chasing servants through the woods, but Ramsay bored easily and he was always looking for ways to make the games more interesting. For instance, if he added a knife to the stick fight, it changed the game completely. When he used a bow and arrow to help him in the chase, made it more exciting. Ramsay discovered the power of killing from a very young age. In his 5th year he had caught a rat racing through his room. When it struggled, he squeezed. He squeezed and squeezed until it went still in his hands. It made him feel powerful to do that. He tried it again with whatever animals he could find. Rats, mice, cats, not dogs. He liked dogs for their loyalty. Besides, if you trained them right, they could be used as weapons as well. But the thing about killing, well, that got boring too after a while. Whether he squeezed a rat to death or shot an arrow into a servant boy's neck from 50 paces away, it was over so quickly that way. Humans and animals were so fragile, so easy to destroy. So Ramsay learned to be a little more careful. He learned how to drag it out. That was why flaying appealed to him. It broke down a person slowly, gradually, and you could learn so much about them that way. How long did it take them to break? How long did it take them to beg? How long did they last before their heart gave out? But just flaying, that could get boring too sometimes. Ramsay was so easily bored. Years after he squeezed his first rat to death, he was still trying to come up with new ways to entertain himself. Myranda and Tansy had been fun for a while. They had both been keen enough to join in on his games. He was able to play them off each other until Myranda proved to be the most interesting. Then the hunt for Tansy, that had been very fun indeed. But once Tansy was gone, Myranda began to bore him too. There was no more competition and her obsession with him was, well, it was dull, but he could use it. Eventually he convinced her to topple from a high tower to prove her love to him. She had done it, though to be fair, he was holding a knife at the time she fell. Perhaps she knew the ground would be a cleaner end. And then she was dead and he was bored again, always looking for a new game. His father had an interesting game going at the moment, playing ally to Walder Frey and then throwing him to the wolves and lions to wear down their numbers. Quite brilliant, really. Ramsay loved the idea, and it could end with them taking control of Winterfell. That would make him heir to the north, assuming his father did not have any true-born sons. He wouldn't allow any true-born sons. He had made sure that his fat wife, Lady Walder, could never bear any. She perished in the process, of course, but that was no real loss. But the real surprise of the whole game, the real interesting twist that amused Ramsay to no end, was Arya Stark. Gods, she was fun. From the moment he saw her, he knew she would be fun. She held her shoulders proud like a lady and her eyes were defiant. It was not the look he expected of a Lannister captive. It was not the look he expected of a noble lady in general. Myranda had grit because she was a kennel master's daughter with nothing to lose. A girl of Arya Stark's position could usually afford to be soft with no real consequences. No, there was no softness about her on the surface. She was sharp as steel, sharp as a wolf's teeth. It took a lot to truly shake her, and she was quick to recover from pain and fear. She was a project that he could really enjoy. In the midst of waiting for the Starks and the Lannisters to finish with the frays, Ramsay used her to alleviate his boredom. She was always surprising him with the little things, her retorts, the way she refused to scream when she was in pain, the way she held his gaze even when her hands were shaking. He loved it. It would be so fun to watch her finally break, but he hoped she lasted a long time. In a way, it was good that he couldn't hurt her too badly. It forced him to savor the experience, to be creative. What a challenge, what a fun game. And just when he thought it couldn't get any more fun, his father introduced a new twist. It happened 4 months into the siege of the Riverlands. A rider reached the Dreadfort with news. Their allies were about to set a plan in motion that would cripple the Stark loyalists and, hopefully, kill Robb Stark. It would leave their enemies weakened. Walder Frey had played his part well, the perfect pawn in the Bolton's game. The Lannister armies are still quite strong, his father said. Tywin Lannister did not summon his full forces. There are no Tyrells among their numbers. Likely he knew it was not needed. He will be a greater threat than Robb Stark's remaining men. The snow will still be thick when he arrives, Ramsay said. Spring is not here yet. He does not know how to fight in the cold. Tywin Lannister has fought many wars, he'll manage it, Roose said. You're assuming your opponent's weakness again, but by now he knows that we have his ward. Like I warned, he won't return to the south. He is going to come for us, and soon. Yes, Ramsay had hoped as much. He had heard so much about the brutality of the great Tywin Lannister, and he longed to actually meet him. That business with the Rains and Tarbecks, inspired really, inspired enough that the sound of his song made men quake in their boots. I'd like a song to make men tremble one day. Our benefactor, however, has given us a suggestion that might make Lord Tywin give up the chase, Roose said, if we find ourselves cornered. Our benefactor, Ramsay smirked. Well, I suppose she would know best, wouldn't she? She is his daughter. Cersei Lannister was another fascinating sort of person to Ramsay. Sent back to Casterly Rock by her father, she had been bitterly searching for ways to get back at him ever since, and she seemed to have a special hatred for Arya Stark, though Ramsay could only begin to imagine why. Initially, she backed their rebellion on the north just to strike a blow against the Starks and undercut her father's plans, but then things changed when Arya Stark came north. It was all that the Lioness could have hoped for, it seemed. Their goals happened to align, and Cersei was a woman of considerable wealth. Her support would ensure that the Boltons could easily survive the winter. It might even guarantee them permanent control after her father was dead. He was getting old after all. How much longer could he last? Cersei Lannister claims that her father's interest in the Stark girl is primarily tied to her marriageability, Roose said. If she loses that value, she is sure he will pull back his forces. Ramsay raised an eyebrow. Perhaps, who did you have in mind? You, Roose said. You seem to like the girl, and it's past time you were married now that you bear my name. Ramsay's face lit up in a smile. What a wonderful day this was. He had always considered marriage a rather boring prospect, but she could be fun, at least for a while. It's not certain yet, Roose said. First we must ride for Winterfell and take it before Robb Stark returns to the north. We must take additional captives there, and if we can secure Sansa, well, she is the sister with the better claim to the north. You should marry her then, Ramsay said. You are without a wife again, give the younger to me. As I said, the wedding is not a sure thing, Roose said. Cersei Lannister may be Lord Tywin's daughter, but I don't trust her. She backs us out of spite and loses little if we fail. It is possible that she has misjudged her father's aims. I would rather bargain with Tywin Lannister first to get a sense of him myself. Better not to anger him any more than we already have. Ramsay drummed his fingers against the table. Well, you can't just tempt me with such a delicious possibility and then say it might not happen. I can do whatever I like, Ramsay, Roose said. We leave for Winterfell in an hour. Make sure Arya Stark is tied up so tightly she can't even think to move. Can I tell her about the plan? Ramsay asked with a wide grin. If you please, Roose said. He was never particularly bothered by Ramsay's more sadistic impulses, perhaps because he had so many of the same impulses within himself. He only pretended to be respectable. One of the benefits of being a bastard was that Ramsay never had to pretend anything. Remember, no damage, we must tread carefully here. We're entering the final stage. I won't damage her, Ramsay said. That would be such a waste. Ramsay was positively beaming when he visited Arya that day. It was just past lunch and Arya wished she could go back to sleep. She had barely slept at all in the last 2 days because of nightmares. She'd barely eaten either. The food they served her was partially rotted and had made her want to vomit at the taste. She felt weak, but nonetheless she forced herself to glare at Ramsay when he entered the room. And how are you this morning, little wolf? Arya did not reply. She was not in the mood for this today. She was never in the mood, of course, but especially not right now. The silent treatment, that's fine, I can do the talking. Ramsay leaned back against the door. I have news from the Riverlands. True news or a lie to mess with my head? Arya asked. True news, Ramsay said. Walder Frey is on the edge of defeat and your family still lives. Arya blinked. That actually was good news for her, which meant there had to be some kind of catch. But our allies are about to turn on the Stark loyalists. They'll likely kill many of them in the confusion and chaos. Perhaps even your brother, Ramsay said. That will make his forces smaller than they used to be. Between this and the wall he barely has enough to defend Winterfell. He laughed once. Oh, coincidentally, that's where we're going today. Arya's mouth went dry. What was he saying? Yes, we're going to take Winterfell off your family's hands before your brother returned north. No doubt he'll be rushing back soon, but we are much closer, Ramsay said. So he'll arrive and be stuck in yet another siege, and we'll have so many hostages that, well, he won't have much ground to stand on. Arya felt a bit lightheaded. This wasn't happening. This could not possibly be happening. The children were at Winterfell, and Sansa and Talisa. The Boltons would have no reason to keep them all alive, so who would they kill first to strike out at Robb? His wife, his sister, one or all of his children. She was suddenly glad she hadn't eaten because she felt horrible, nauseous at the thought. That's not even the best news, Ramsay said. Once we get there and we've established firm control over Winterfell, there's going to be a wedding. A wedding. Arya had felt panic and fear in so many forms in these past months. Sometimes it was hot and burned through her heart and mind, making it hard to breathe. But sometimes, like now, it was cold. It crept through her veins and froze her heart. She already knew what Ramsay would say before he said it. She already knew it in her mind and heart. You and I, little wolf, you're going to be my bride. He smiled so wide at the words, so impossibly and cruelly wide. Isn't that wonderful? Something snapped inside of Arya. The blood roared in her ears and she roared too. She let out an inhuman scream and she threw herself at Ramsay with full force. She had no weapon but her teeth and claws, and she used them. She clawed at his face. She bit down on his neck until she tasted blood. It lasted only a few seconds. He was able to flip her off of him and slam her against the ground. His hand closed tight around her throat and he pressed his knee down on her left wrist. Her good hand. She stilled, knowing that if she fought he might break it, and then she would be truly fucked. Ramsay was panting and laughing. Finally, I got to hear you scream. His smile was poison as he looked down at her. I hope I get to hear it again. He stood and left her trembling with hate on the ground, opening the door to 4 soldiers. Bind her hands and legs, then bring her. I don't want her moving. She glared fiercely up at him, wishing she could kill him with her gaze. She had never loathed anyone so deeply, never wanted to kill anyone so much. All those other names on her list, the dead and the living, Joffrey, Cersei, Lord Tywin, they were nothing to her in that moment. There was only name at all she wanted dead. Ramsay Bolton. Ramsay Bolton. Ramsay Bolton. I will give everything I am. I will pay any price. Just let me kill Ramsay Bolton. Chapter 44, The First Arrow. Sansa had been expecting an army. From the moment she sent the rider with the letter to Robb, she began to prepare for an attack on Winterfell. It only made sense after all. While Stark loyalists were occupied with Mance Rayder in the north and Walder Frey in the south, Winterfell was left highly vulnerable. She had just enough archers to guard the walls of the castle all the way around, and barely enough soldiers to put up a fight if the army broke through. To make matters worse, Sansa was not an expert at warfare, not by a long shot. She had never presumed she would need to prepare for a siege. That was usually men's work, and it was kept well out of her studies as a child. She knew how to organize resources for a long winter, which she supposed was helpful if the attackers tried to starve them out. And Talisa was skilled at treating the wounded, which may help to minimize their losses. But Sansa doubted the Boltons would give them a chance to use either of those skills. The Boltons would not try for a drawn-out siege. They would make a full attack on Winterfell to take the castle. If they did not, Robb's armies would be upon them within a week. They had to take it now. They could not afford to wait. And their odds were good. Winterfell did not have enough men or enough time to properly prepare. Those in the most danger were the children. As Robb's heirs, the Boltons would want to get rid of them entirely. The same had happened to Rhaegar Targaryen's children after all. The most obvious choice was to send them away to another castle in secret. But the Boltons might be expecting that. They might even have a spy already in Winterfell who could tell them of the children's departure. How else could they have known where to find Arya and Bran on that day, after all? No, Winterfell was safer than the open road, and even if the attackers did take the castle, there were places to hide them. Sansa hoped for at least a week to prepare for the attack, but the Boltons gave them less than 3 days. It was then that the watchmen reported a massive army sweeping over the hill, bearing the flag of Bolton above them. With them came Umbers, Karstarks, Ryswells, Locks. All of the families Osha had mentioned had arrived at their gates. Sansa felt bile rise up in the back of her throat, but she choked it down again. Memories of the Battle of Blackwater stirred in the back of her mind. She remembered the stench of fire and blood that poisoned the air. Soon, that would come for Winterfell and the people inside. There would be no mercy from the Boltons. Who could ever expect mercy from a traitorous house with a flayed man for their sigil? Still, she and Taliesin stood atop the wall above the gate as the armies approached. Taliesin must have been as terrified as Sansa, but for her part she did not show her fear. She had seen men bleed many times and even sawed of their limbs to save them. She did not frighten easily. "The children are safe," Taliesin said, "already tucked away and with plenty to last them until their father arrives. The Boltons won't find them if they do break the castle." "They might," Sansa murmured. "It only takes one aimless guard or a few good dogs." "Shaggy Dog will protect them," Taliesin said. "I've never seen a few good dogs win a fight against a wolf." Sansa nodded once and looked back over the walls. The armies had stopped not far from the gates. At their lead was the bastard of the Dreadfort, Ramsay Bolton. Sansa guessed that Roose Bolton had sent Ramsay ahead to take the castle. "Lady Stark and Lady Sansa," Ramsay called up. "Kind of you to come to the walls to greet us. I don't suppose you will do us the courtesy of opening the gate and allowing us inside. We are quite tired from our journey." "That is a shame," Taliesin said. "We have no room for traitors here." "You don't have the men to oppose them either," Ramsay said. "You have archers, I see, but probably not the best archers in the army. We have many times the arrows and men that you have, and more ladders than you can cut down." He inspected the walls. "It doesn't seem you've had much time to make preparations either." "It doesn't take many men to hold Winterfell," Sansa said, making her voice stronger than she felt, "and they will gladly give their lives to do it." "They will give their lives," Ramsay said, "unless you do something about it. Open the gates and no one inside will be harmed. Yield the castle to me. I am a man of mercy." He had a wicked smile as he said the words. It made his intentions horribly clear. He planned to kill anyone who was not of use to him, and he would not do it kindly. Sansa recognized in his eyes the same malice she once saw in Joffrey. "I once asked a man like you for mercy," Sansa said at last. "I learned the hard way that he had none. I will not make the same mistake twice. We will not yield." "Won't you?" Ramsay asked. "Not even for your sister?" The words stabbed at Sansa's heart. Only now did Sansa see a smaller figure being ushered through the crowd. She was bound tightly so that she could barely even walk on her own, and her mouth was gagged so she could not speak. Arya. Sansa hadn't recognized her for a moment. Her sister had always been skinny, but now she looked almost skeletal. Her cheeks were sunken in and her face was pale as if she had not seen sunlight in all her months at the Dreadfort, but her eyes were still Arya's. They burned with vengeful grey fire as she glared at Ramsay. He merely smiled back at her and placed a hand on her head, ruffling her hair. "Don't feel too worried for her. This is a familiar position for your sister. Certainly not the first time she's been used to force family to bend," Ramsay said. "I wonder, how did Tywin Lannister argue for it? Surrender or I'll kill your sister." "I was not there," Sansa muttered. "I could not say." "Well, however he did it, the threat stands for me," Ramsay said. "Open the gate, Lady Sansa, or I'll open her throat." Sansa's hand was trembling as she looked down at Arya. Her sister looked right back at her and shook her head. Even in this weakened state she was defiant. If Sansa did not know better, she might even say she was fearless. But neither of them was fearless. Sansa knew that. They were both simply playing a game of trying to look strong. Arya had always been better at that game than her, but still Sansa could see through her. Sansa could not watch her die. She had already been forced to watch her father lose his head. How could she watch her little sister meet the same fate? Why was her family always in such peril? Taliesin rested a hand over hers, and the feeling brought Sansa back to reality. She drew in a deep breath and held Ramsay's gaze. "If I opened the gates, most of the people inside would die because they are expendable to you," Sansa said. "I don't think Arya would forgive me if I gave over our home so easily." "So the answer is still no. We will not open the gates." The look in Arya's eyes was relieved. Of course, Arya would never forgive herself either if Sansa opened the gates because she was taken hostage. "So your sister's life means nothing to you?" Ramsay asked. Sansa's jaw clenched. "If you did not need my sister alive for something, she would already be dead, or at least she would be in much worse shape than she is now. The fact that she is still on her feet shows that she's not expendable to you. Not yet." Ramsay's smile did not falter, but it did sharpen. "You're right, not yet." Then he snapped his fingers. Sansa expected for a moment that she might see Arya killed after all, but that was not what happened. As she had been so focused on her sister, she did not notice the lone archer who had slowly drawn his bow, until exactly 1 second before he loosed the arrow. The shaft whistled past her, close enough that she felt it pass her arm, just before it struck Taliesin in the chest. It was against all of the rules of war to strike at someone while still discussing terms. Sansa knew that much. Ramsay Bolton did not care for rules or honour or any of the ideals her father held in such high esteem, but still it shocked her to see him cross such a line. Sansa felt Taliesin's hand slip from her own as she fell back. She looked down in horror and shock for a long moment before she fell to her knees beside her. Blood bubbled from the wound around the arrow. For a moment, Sansa wanted to pull it out, but Taliesin grasped her wrist before she could. "It will only make the bleeding faster," she rasped. "You'll be all right," Sansa said. You can tell me what to do. You know how to handle wounds like these, don't you? Give me instructions, or I can find Maester Luwin. I can find someone." Her words fell from her mouth in a panic, and tears burned her eyes. It didn't make sense. Taliesin would have been a valuable hostage. Did Ramsay consider her one hostage too many? He knew Robb had 3 children after all, and he already had Arya in his grasp. Perhaps he did not think he needed the wife. Perhaps he just wanted to eliminate the Stark name as quickly as possible. Taliesin squeezed Sansa's hand, staring up at the sky. "It's too late, Sansa, it's too late." "It's not, please, I need you to stand with me. I can't do this alone," Sansa whispered. "They had good aim, I'm sore," she coughed, and blood spurt from her mouth, staining the collar of her dress. "Just, the children, you have to protect the children." "They'll be fine," Sansa promised, "but you need to stay for them, they need you." She gripped her hand as tightly as she could. Taliesin had been another sister to her since she returned to Winterfell, and a good wife to Robb. They had the sort of marriage that Sansa always read about in her books, 2 people who married for love and adored each other afterwards. She did not even want to think of Robb's face when he found out, when he saw. Taliesin wasn't focusing on Sansa anymore. She was looking past her up at the sky. So many arrows. Sansa heard them. She heard arrows whizzing overhead and the screams of some of the archers as they were struck with the bolts. Normally there would be archers to replace them, but they did not have enough, not nearly enough. Besides the soldiers, they had only old men and women and children. They could hold a bow perhaps, but there were just too many arrows from the other side. They were going to lose. It felt as if they had already lost. Even as Sansa had been an expert at warfare, no one could have prepared Winterfell for this army in only 3 days' time, but still she felt like a failure. "Ned," Taliesin murmured, "be careful of the arrows there. Sharp, stay back from them." She was delirious now and her eyes looked so far away. "Robb, get Ned, he'll hurt himself, please." Then she seemed to still, her last word still on her lips. Her eyes gazed out at nothing. The arrow had done its job. For a long moment, Sansa lingered there, shivering with fear and sorrow. Troubles never ended for House Stark, did they? She had hoped her nephews and niece might know a childhood without war, but already they had lost their mother to it. I've failed everyone. Lady Sansa." Sansa felt Brienne's heavy hand on her shoulder. "We need to go. It won't take them long to breach the walls." "I have to lead," Sansa murmured. "Lead or not, they will come over the walls and they'll be all too happy to have you as a hostage or a casualty," Brienne said. "You shouldn't give them anything more to use against your brother." She was right, they already had Arya. She should not give them 2 sisters. It would only put Arya in more danger and make either one of them expendable. "When they break us, I will go," Sansa said at last. "But until they do, I stay. I won't leave this place in chaos." She stood and hurried down the wall, away from the danger of the arrows. Brienne followed close behind, shielding her with her armoured body. In the courtyard, the soldiers stood strong, along with the less prepared citizens who held whatever weapons they could find. "Lady," one said, "orders." "I am not fit to lead a war," Sansa thought, "but I will try." "Shore up the gates," Sansa said, "and keep your shields above your heads. They'll be using ladders to get over the walls. That means only a few of them will get in at a time. Kill them as they do. The Boltons may have more men than we do, but as long as they have less men inside the walls, we can still beat them. We are of the north. Winterfell is ours. We will keep them back. Or at least delay them for a while." She was not sure if her speech was convincing, but the soldiers squared their shoulders and moved to do as she said, and Sansa stood in the courtyard, knowing it would soon be full of bodies. Taliesin was the first of many deaths to come. They held for one day. The Bolton armies had arrived at sunrise, and it was nearly sunrise again. If only the sunlight brought any hope with it. Their numbers were enough to keep back the Bolton armies and keep casualties low. But after fighting through the night, everyone was beginning to tire, and they did not have the men to give those who had been standing guard at the wall a break or a rest. To make matters worse, the Boltons had been slowly chipping at their defences, bit by bit, arrow by arrow. There were gaps now in the archers at the wall and not enough arrows, especially now that their castle had been surrounded. A group of 10 Bolton men made it into Winterfell and cut down 3 archers and 5 swordsmen before they were killed by the survivors. Brienne herself killed 3, but when Sansa looked up, she saw another wave soon to come. "It's about to fall apart, my lady," Brienne said softly. "You lead well, but we are running out of time." She was right, of course she was right. Sansa knew it all along that this wouldn't last. "My lady," Brienne said when she responded, "we should go to the children now." Sansa nodded once, but not before turning to one of the older soldiers whose sword had slain many men that day. "I leave you in command on the ground. Keep them back for as long as you can," Sansa murmured. "I am, lady," the man replied. He knew it was lost and he knew he was dead. She could see it in his eyes. "Get somewhere safe." Sansa placed a hand at his arm, offering him a thankful smile. Then she hurried after Brienne. Even though she felt light-headed and helpless and like an awful failure, she had to keep moving. There was no choice. She had not had much time to prepare the castle, but she had time to prepare the crypts. She had prepared them with supplies that would last a few people several months. It was meant, initially, for Taliesin and the children. Now it would be for her and the children. Only 3 people alive knew about the place in the crypts. Osha, Maester Luwin, Brienne. Sansa had told everyone else that she had sent the children away to another castle just in case there was a spy, and if anyone was tortured, that was the information they would give to Ramsay. Meanwhile, they would hide in the underground maze of the crypts and wait out the storm, wait for Robb to come. They reached the entrance just as she saw more Bolton men making their way over the western wall. She took one last look at the Winterfell courtyard before ducking inside the entrance of the crypt. Her parents used to say that there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, and as a Stark, she would weather this awful battle and keep Robb's legacy safe.